You're welcome. Uh, anyway, as you can see, we had technical difficulties. I'm glad everyone's hearing me. I'm sorry, I don't have a webcam on this particular computer, so you can't see my face, but I'm kind of ugly anyway. So anyway, so let's begin. Open source security is the title of this presentation, and we're going to deviate just a little bit from that for some useful tools. So here, I always like to start off everything with a TLDR. So if you just want to go ahead and grab a screenshot and then and walk away from the presentation, just go ahead and Google all those things, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So just as a fair warning, I am a veteran. I have over 30 years of military service, so from time to time I accidentally slip out a curse word. So I apologize for that ahead of time, as most certainly it's never my intent to ever offend anybody, but sometimes. So usually a lot of people, you talk about where you come from and what you do. Instead, today I thought I'd show you the team I represent. And I don't know if any of you recognize that symbol from the World of Warcraft. And just a special shout out to the over 36,000 Alliance players I've defeated in virtual combat. So just a shout out to you if you're out there. And you may wonder, how did they talk about, how did we get into security? How did I get into security? So my journey into information security is kind of funny. So one day, my boss came up to me and said, hey, Phil, there's this cybersecurity project we want you to take ownership of. And I was like, seriously, I hate security. Can you have Bill do that? One of my peers, and who's actually a premier security architect. And my boss decided, hey, awesome. The kickoff meeting is in the morning, and I'll see you there. So this is where I am today. I discovered that meme on the internet. It suits me. Paul Blart is my spirit animal. So I've now been working security for, I don't know, 20 years or so, maybe more, I don't know. And I don't have any regrets. So this presentation originally, I watched the speakers yesterday. They had some wonderful speakers. I hope you had the opportunity to see them as well. But the funny thing is, a lot of them were talking about what I was going to talk about. So last night and this morning, I kind of changed my presentation around. So, and to make it maybe more applicable to the real world for those of us, with our boots on the ground who have to do this every day. And open source tools, I'm looking at no cost things. So audience wise, I was thinking about, who my audience was going to be and who I'm talking to. And what I decided is going to be kind of a small to medium sized business model kind of idea. Those of you from large companies, you'd be surprised how much those of us from the small companies, how much we struggle to be able to afford commercial resources. So we rely heavily on open source, or we need to. So the type of things I don't plan on talking about are like limited license products, free trials, that sort of thing. There's tons of them out there, excuse me. Or breaking license, end user license agreements. I'm not going to talk about that. Just a good example off the top of my head would be something like Adobe Photoshop. Something I've seen on my enterprise. I had to move unlicensed software. And another thing would be something like TeamViewer, which is a tool for remote access. It's free to use personally, but if you use it commercially, they expect you to get a license. So I'm not talking about things like that. Instead, I'm going to talk about some open source platforms that I have experience with. Employee education, which has always been near and dear to my heart. Governance, which nobody likes to talk about. network traffic analysis, a major tool in the whole defense in depth concepts and active network defense. Security through DNS. Now, I don't mean DNS security. I mean security through DNS, and I'll talk about that. Endpoint security, some open source tools there. Incident detection and response. Really, I should have just titled that incident response. OTX, that was mentioned a few times yesterday, I remember, the Open Threat Exchange. And just some ancillary tools out there that makes it, easier for you to do your security jobs. So first, these open source platforms, and Linux, I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. VirtualBox, I'll explain why I put that there. Kali Linux Security Onion, that is an awesome platform, Security Onion, and I'll talk about that. Now, one thing that comes to mind in case I forget to mention this later, with Security Onion, when you install it, it's best to put the supporting server, install that hardwire on bare wire, I guess they say. Don't run it in VM. And AlienVault OSIM, I know was talked about yesterday. So first, let's take a look at Linux. And it's really important. If you're working security, it is really important that you learn Linux, because so many tools, and especially hackers exclusively, almost entirely live on Linux and Mac, but mostly on Linux. And it's really important to learn that platform. So if you're not familiar with Linux, which is my assumption, there's these two schools of Linux. These are platforms, they're supported distributions is what they would be called, open source. You can take an old laptop that has almost no power with Windows, maybe not, it won't even run Windows 10 because the hardware, and you can install Linux on it and bring that laptop back into production. So Linux is a great platform to learn. And it went too fast there, but anyway, I call it OpenSUSE. That middle symbol there, that orange round circle, that's Ubuntu. Is the distribution, and just the one down on the bottom, Xubuntu. That is a flavor of Ubuntu. It has a different desktop, and it's just the one I prefer to work with when it comes to working with tools. And it's out there. These are all, again, these are open source platforms that cost you nothing. You don't have to worry about licensing and all that good stuff. And the reason I have VirtualBox there, now VirtualBox, if you're not familiar with it, is it's like VMware. It's like VM Player. But the reason I didn't really bring VM Player into this presentation is because you would have a limited license, or or a pay window or a pay gateway. So, but with VirtualBox, you can just download it and use it to create a virtual environment. So if you're not familiar with Linux, you can download, and you run Windows, you can download VirtualBox, install it, and then create a virtual Linux machine using VirtualBox. And that's a good way to learn. And also with VirtualBox, it takes some Googling, it takes some learning, but if you like my desktop computer here, I use for gaming, so it's really souped up. But I can use several VirtualBox instances and create a virtual network to do testing and stuff like that on. So VirtualBox can be a very powerful tool. Kali Linux, I assume most of you are familiar with it. If you're not, Kali Linux is a distribution supported by offensive security. It's used by pen testers, and like in this particular distribution, if I listed all the open source tools available on it, and try to go over every one of those, we'd be here till next week. So, but Kali Linux, it has the Metasploit on it. It has things like Burp Suite. You can, and that I'll be talking about later, you can use for analyzing websites and that kind of thing, for security analysis and pen testing. Security Onion, I know Security Onion was talked about very fondly yesterday. I love Security Onion, so I kind of redid uh, my presentation and what it just. I'm going to show you how powerful a platform that is if you're not familiar with it. And the same thing with Alien Vault. Alien Vault is now recently, say the past year or so, that platform has been purchased by AT&T, AT&T Security. There's a commercial version that they call USM, which I'm familiar with, and they have their open source version, OSIM, and I'm going to talk more detail on how using these products, how it applies and how it works. But these are absolutely awesome platforms. And kind of like what I mentioned before, Alien Vault does run very nice, very cleanly in a virtual environment, but Security Onion, it just lessons learned. You want to put that server on bare wire, and otherwise you'll have a lot of problems. So before I start talking about employee education, are there any questions so far? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Anything? I'm going to try to open the chat window here. And I apologize. This is the first time I've ever really been a presenter on this particular platform like this. So apologize if I'm stuttering along here. So anyways, employee education. I can't stress enough having your employees, information security awareness training, how important that is. I like where I'm at right now. I mean, I can literally show you in the metrics over the years how I changed the training, and my number of security incidents have gone way down. And I've created a platform where administrators are stepping up and saying, hey, there's a better way to do these things security wise, and employee education plays a big part of that. So there we go. Anyway, so 3 very important elements of employee education, and I'm going to show you some of the open source tools that's what I'm getting at to use to do that. So policy is very important. Make sure every employee's trained that there is a policy and they signed a piece of paper that they acknowledge it. Your attorneys will appreciate that. And I want to talk about information security awareness and a continuing awareness program. So first, policy, you're kind of on your own. But like when developing documents and stuff, and 2 open source platforms that you can use is LibreOffice and OpenOffice, and just in case you're not familiar with them. So in developing like your training for information security awareness, YouTube is a great resource. You'd be surprised if you want to learn how to do anything, just go out to YouTube. It's going to be there. But some channels that I kind of recommend from YouTube is Kaspersky. You'll find that they have some simple videos that you can play to a non-technical audience about, computer viruses and computer security, and you use that to enrich the training you give your employees. News channels. Current events is always very important. There's one video, that's the title of the video, Watch This Hacker Break Into a Company. It's from CNN Business. The video is actually very old, and I only show like the first 2 minutes of it or so, but it's amazing. It just, a hacker just goes through and it shows the news person how easy it was for him to hack into a corporate network by calling its help desk. It's a great video. So another great channel is the SANS Security Awareness channel. I'm sure everyone's familiar with SANS Institute, and they have a video called Malware Security Awareness Video, and it's just really well put together. So like if you're doing a class, you need to explain malware, the different types of malware to a non-technical audience. It's a great video for that. Another document, NIST, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, 800-50. I'm sure you hear a lot of NIST documentation numbers thrown around. I think this one is still displayed, but I think it's kind of in the deprecated bucket. But it's section 4.1.1, selecting awareness topics. It's just a list. It's a really good list of topics that give you give your brain some juice to what you want to teach in your class. that kind of thing, what type of training you want to give your employees. So it's a great resource. And I mentioned this before, the OpenOffice, LibreOffice, these are open source platforms. You can download, use them for free. They're usually built into the Linux distributions I was talking about. And you can create presentations. These are tools you can use without, because some people honestly can't afford Microsoft products and they use Google Docs. I'm not a big fan of Google Docs. I prefer using OpenOffice and LibreOffice. They're more powerful. So also including the information security training. This is just a screenshot. This is me. This is one of my dashboards, and it just show your employee. You know, it's a super powerful tool you can add to your training to show your employees that hey, your organization's at risk, just like everyone else attached to the internet. And in this display, this is actually from Office 365. And this is a user whose account was compromised. And gotta make a long story short, where you see interrupted, what it is, that's when they entered, the attackers entered the password and it triggered a multi-factor an MFA response and whatnot. But anyways, you can show your employees, you know, live real data. Hey, we are at risk. We really need to think before you click. So anyways, a continued awareness program is something that you should be doing, or an organization should be doing, I should say, throughout the year. So, right, we got these compliance requirements where we give, you know, the employees go through their information security awareness training every year. Those of us from the government, the Department of Defense, we remember that silliness. But also, a continued awareness program is something that's done all year long. That's like having awareness posters you can get for free from certain publications. You put them in employee break rooms and that kind of thing. This website, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, their link, you go to their website, they have good resources there. Ouch. Now, has everyone heard of SANS, the SANS Institute? Well, this is part of their Securing the Human, and the Ouch newsletter is a monthly newsletter. It's something, and it covers in non-technical terms simple security concepts, and like you can share the link with your employees and that kind of thing. Another thing you do is to put it in your company newsletter, and you can use your company newsletter to keep security awareness up. So like if you have a weekly newsletter, you might, you know, just put a little message out, have a little security section in there, and keep hounding security on your employees. Pounding. Anyway, you'll be surprised. What do they say? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So your continued awareness program is really an important part of that. So governance, and just by the way, if I'm talking too fast, if I'm talking too slow, if you get a question, go ahead and make sure you throw it out there in the chat, and hopefully Andrew, he'll let me know and whatnot, and I'm trying to watch that. So now governance. Oh, I know everybody hates governance. I get that. So, but you'd be surprised. There's some powerful tools out there as an you can use as an architect or as a security analyst to help you do your job. So just briefly, the NIST framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'm gonna talk about that briefly. PCI DSS, and I know what some of you are thinking. PCI, you know, you probably want to crawl through the internet and choke me right now. But yeah, I'm going to talk about that. And finally, that attack matrix. So first, NIST. So they have this thing, the circle of life, which, you know, if you're a salesman and you show up and your presentation starts with the circle of life, just so you know, you lost me already. So, but anyways, it is something we all identify with. You know, identify your risk, protect yourself from them, try to actively detect if they occur, respond to them when they do, and recover from it. So that comes from NIST. And what I did, I stolen a few of their slides. And what it is, that first thing right there says it's core. They have what they call their core document. And I'll go a little bit more into detail of that. It doesn't hurt. And I understand those of us from smaller organizations, those of us with smaller budgets, we don't have time to deal with, I should have silenced my phone. Now my phone is silent. this type of thing because we're too busy trying to keep the show running. So, but it is a powerful tool. So, and one of the things it explains about risk, everything should be risk based. And so, just a current event that happened to us. So I get an email. The guys at Checkpoint, uh, rightfully so, they're patting themselves on the back. Their labs had found that DNS exploit. Right? Everyone's familiar with that DNS thing with Microsoft DNS server that they had to patch 2 weeks ago. Well, risk-based. So I was reading it, and it was like a VCSS score 10. And I was like, wait a minute, a 10, that's when the bits come flying through your computer and choke out your pets. I mean, this is really dangerous. How can it be this dangerous? So I did more research on it, and Microsoft had a workaround for it. So I looked at the workaround, and I'm not a programmer, I'm not a developer, I don't pretend to be, but I recognized that the workaround was an address-based limitation. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, so even though they won't say what this exploit is, it's obviously some type of buffer overflow. And I'm assuming, I could be wrong. So I went on out, and the different sources went out to Twitter, open thread exchanges. Twitter's another resource. But they're kind of copyrighted, so I didn't want to say their name. But so I went out to a security researcher out on Twitter, and he was tweeting about it, and he had noticed that too. And I went looking, were no exploits for it. So I'm back to risk. So I'm like, well, how does it have this huge risk score? So reaching down, well, the workaround, like I triggered, it told all these people what to defend against. So even though I don't have the skills to write the buffer overflow attack or whatever that is, these other people I was following on Twitter and other places, they do have those skills. So the risk was real. It was a risk level 10. Whereas like if you take a look at running your vulnerability assessments on your network, like for me, like I'll see really high scores on vulnerability, and I'll take a look. Are there any exploits available? Well, no, there's no exploit. So you have to rate this vulnerability. Is it something I need to require the administrators to fix right now because the risk is huge, or can we just wait for the regular patch cycle? So that's why I highlighted risk. And when you go to this particular framework and take a look and think of it in terms of risk, it really does help make a lot of sense of how you can apply this particular knowledge base to what you do every day. And this is like management level stuff. And a friend of mine, Chris, he's a high level security person with a national food chain. And he's one of those guys, he'd be like that PR AC-6, and he could just quote it. I've never been that way. But here within, this is the NIST framework core, what they call their core. Basically, this spreadsheet talks about the concept identity management and access control for this one, and it has little subcategories where it's talking about identity, and you can go back, you can use these as tools and just read it. You don't necessarily, like me, you don't have to memorize it, but just go take a look and see, does your organization meet these standards? And it's a good way. So that's from the management side. Now I'm dropping you down to the technology side, and PCI, if you're not familiar with them, they're the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council, and they publish a document known as the Data Security Standard, and it's very technology driven. And within the technology security, the Data Security Standard, the DSS, like as always, it talks about people, processes, and technologies, right? For anything that stores, processes, or transmits, I should have put payment card data, credit card data. But take a look, you can use that guide, that DSS, and go back. Credit card data is just one crown jewel. Can you apply those same standards? Would you be considered compliant with your employee W-2 data? using these same standards. And I really love these standards from the DSS. They can be at times very difficult to implement, but if you can go through and apply these standards to how you store your employee PII data and how it's managed, people, processes, technologies, anything that stores, processes, or transmits, how well is that data being protected? Things like future marketing strategies, like where I come from, the internet retail world, marketing is a big thing, how we make our money. We don't want the competition to know about it beforehand, or even confidential designs and formulas. So this, again, like I say, it's not an open source tool, but it's out there, it's open, and you can use it as a tool to evaluate yourself against things other than credit card data. Because of all the governance documents out there, I feel the DSS is very technology driven, and it makes sense to technology people, whereas the previous one from NIST is more for management people. So, and here's something else that's kind of very technology driven. And if you're not familiar with this particular website or this framework, so the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So here's just a screenshot I grabbed from their website, and I highlighted a box. And what it is, these are TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures of known APTs, advanced persistent threats. This is how they attack you. This is what they do. They have procedures they must follow. And what I did, I highlighted that one there, create an account. So when we dig down further, what it's basically talking about, that when you're a red team, once you can get on a box, you want to be able to be persistent. And one of those ways to do that, you create a local account. And I'm going to be referencing this later in my presentation. So now I'm going to talk about network traffic analysis. So high level, Snort and Suricata, those are engines. Snort, of course, now is owned by Cisco. It used to be totally open source, but they do make it available to the public. And they have 2 rule sets. So like if you have a free account, you can get the 30-day-old rule set, and most compliance standards require that your IDSs be updated every 90 days. So having a free account keeps you compliant. And Suricata, I believe, it was started by the government, but I think it's been taken. Anyway, it's another IDS engine, IDS IPS engine that's out there. You can download it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about it being integrated into Alien Vault and Security Onion, because Snort and Suricata, you can install them standalone on a server, on a computer, and they'll do their job. But all the other things you have to put on, it makes the job complicated. Alien Vault and Security Onion make it easy. Further on in my presentation, I'm going to talk a lot about Alien Vault. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to concentrate mostly on Security Onion. And I can't tell you, this is an extremely powerful tool. And like I said, when you install it, the server itself, because you can have sensors and servers and database servers where the data is stored and all that sort of thing. But the server needs to be installed on bare wire. It's recommended in the documentation. It's fully documented. And for through life experience, you don't want to run it through a VM. So first, here's this screen. I try to sanitize my internal IPs the best I can. Like I said, I redid my presentation kind of last night and this morning. So I grabbed this today, and what this is just one view in a product called Squirt Views. And what it's doing, it is showing me the relationship of IP traffic throughout the network. And like one of the, of course, I can't do it here because it's just a graphic, but you can hover over each one of those lines, and it'll bring up, destination and source IP and port addresses and whatnot. And it's a way to dig deep. And well, I guess fortunately I didn't see one, but it's a good way. If you had a computer internal in your network that was a part of a botnet, you'd see it, because that one computer would have these massive connections all over the planet, and it kind of stick out like sore thumbs. And kind of down in the middle where I cut out those IP addresses. These are kind of like man in the middle situations, but I mean, I know what those are. They're DNS servers and others. So it's able, this engine is able to analyze your network traffic data, and I love this tool. So here's another. It's called Squirt. It's part of Security Onion. So this is kind of like a dashboard of just alarms. And yes, I do see that one at the top, SNMP public access. I know, I got my challenges at work too. So it's just a dashboard of alarms that were detected. In this case, it's Suricata. If you look at some of the name, ET, that stands for emerging threats. Emerging threats provide signatures to these IDS engines. So, and it's Suricata. And there's another one here. It says Suricata HTTP, unable to match responses and blah, blah, blah. So these are all the types of alerts that it can find through network traffic analysis. And you can use that to dig deeper and to what the alarm is and what it means. And it's a great tool to help you investigate what was going on. And here is a packet capture from Bro or Zeek, I believe they call it now. And it just, boom. I want to go to the next one. So what I was talking about are signatures, like your IDS, IPS signatures. If you're not familiar with what you're looking at here, this is Squeal. And yes, that's the name of it. So whenever you deal with snort, they have things like pulled pork. Pulled pork is an automated tool that updates your signatures. Squeal, this is an old school tool, been around a long time, but it's super powerful. And you can use it, and down on the bottom right there, it's the signature itself. It begins with alert. UDP, and you need to learn how to read the signatures to help you better understand and analyze the alert that went off. Because for me, I have a lot of overlapping traffic, how things are set up. So they're not false positives. A false positive really is when you have a signature fire when the data wasn't present. This would be more like a maltuned sensor, because data was there to be detected, but it was nothing for me to worry about. So anyway, it's just Security Onion is a super powerful tool. So kind of watching my clock here, I'm running. I knew I was going to have too much to talk about, so I'm going to speed up. So here's Kibana. And one thing that's beautiful about Security Onion is recently they moved in Elastic Stack and Kibana and all this stuff for collecting and analyzing data. It really made Security Onion was beautiful before. Today, it's even more powerful than you can imagine. So, and I'm just showing you screenshots that I took last night or maybe this morning, and you can just click on all these things and just, what am I interested in? In this case, what I did, RDP, and see what was going on there. So, and that's all that is. So any questions about network traffic analysis? Again, Alien Vault also has a SIM. They call it Alien Vault NIDS, Network Intrusion Detection System. It's built on one of those engines, but they call it their NIDS. So, but it works the same way. It'll use emerging or snort type signatures. The way those signatures are written are different than YAML-based signatures that, just off the top of my head, like FireEye, if you're familiar with those products. You can write your own signatures for them in YAML, which is different and 20,000 times more complicated than writing in JSON. But anyway, if there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead, and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to speed up here. So remember, I said security through DNS, not DNS security, not the same thing. So what I did, I brought out this old gem, this link here. And what it is, you can download a host file, put it on your computer, and basically it's an ad blocker. You're done. Basically, it's a huge list. It acts like an ad blocker. Those URLs are just sent to the bit bucket, 127.0.0.1. And there's a way you can implement this with your DNS servers. So everyone on your enterprise, when they go to, I don't know, pick a news site, foxnews.com, cnn.com, they get the warning that the ad blocker's running when it's not. So, but anyways, this is a good example of kind of, I'm going to have a little squirrel moment. I'm going to go off to the side. It used to be back in the day. I mean, for those of us who have been doing this long enough, the only real security that was out there was open source. It was the communities. You had to go to them because, you know, the Windows 2000, the Windows 2003 platforms were just hammered with security flaws. You couldn't keep up with it. So here, this particular website I'm showing, kind of an old timer. I think it was just ran by an individual. And it's a great tool. I put that thing on my computer, um, and now he's getting ill. And just over time, our open source communities, our open source security communities, are fading away. Snort was bought by Cisco. AlienVault bought by AT&T. And if you take a look, OpenVOS, we'll talk about that. OpenVOS, you know, kind of split and went Tenable Nessus, and OpenVOS. And now OpenVOS is bought by another company. And so, like, our tools are leaving us. Even if you ever go to a DEF CON or any of those conventions, you know, I remember security researchers won't even show their faces anymore because the big companies are going after them. You know, back in the day, it was just a gentleman's rule of doing my research. Hey, I found this flaw. I created this exploit. You let Microsoft know. You go, hey, I found this. I'm going to release the code in 30 days or 90 days. You know, now they're too scared to do that because of legalities and everything else. So anyway, let's get back on track. Security through DNS, OTX. Now, I mentioned I'm going to try to talk about application of this, of these open source tools. So that's why I kind of changed my presentation this morning for this. So here's a real live alert I pull off of this is AlienVault. And the bottom line is a DNS request from a host computer through my domain server. And then you see it leave my domain server and go to outside, you know, upstream DNS server. And according to Open Threat Exchange, so it has something to do with this, right? So this is something you can Google later if you want. So what I did, you dig down deeper, right? And this alert is based on, it saw a DNS request for this domain, that adofd.com. So a security researcher out there, it could be true, it could be false. You know, these are low confidence signatures, but there's someone who's probably a lot smarter than me decided that whatever this deal ply is, this adware is a problem. And that's why he's alerting on it. So you can just go to, I went ahead of myself. Anyway, like I said, you go to your DNS servers, you can put in that domain and redirect it to a Bitbucket, or you can redirect them to an internal web page that says, you know, basically, you tell the user you may be accessing a dangerous website. If you're sure there's a business need for this, please contact the help desk or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, and I'm going to talk, I'm going to pepper in about security through DNS. Let me just go back just so I kind of stay on topic. And those of you are probably aware, like Cisco Umbrella, if you deal with Akamai has those type of services also. And the thing is, even though you pay those huge dollars for those services, you're still going to see stuff like this come onto your domain. And what you can do if you have those commercial services, instead of modifying your DNS server, Akamai just being a good example, I can go out to Akamai and I can add this domain to my blacklist, and then that would be it. I'd never see it again on my enterprise. So, anyways, endpoint security, OSEC. I mean, the discussion stops there. OSEC is an awesome tool. You can run it standalone. I focus more on how it's integrated with Security Onion and how it's integrated with AlienVault on both the commercial product USM and their open source OSIM. So first, just so you know, there we go. want to sound a little bit like a sales pitch. It does log-based intrusion detection, and I'll explain what that is and how that works and how powerful that is. Rootkit and malware detection, awesome tool, especially the rootkit on the Linux boxes. Compliance auditing, in this case, it does collect what's installed on the computers and whatnot. Like if you plug in, like the world I came from in the Department of Defense, you didn't plug in USB drives into a computer. You'd go to jail. So, it would alert you to it when people do things like that. File integrity management, that's a big compliance thing. Built-in wise, it looks for, like in Linux, the /bin directory. In Windows, the Windows System 32, so needless to say, whenever you apply patches, you get a lot of alerts and registry changes alerts. So, but but you can configure it to monitor. Let's say you store certain files like an archive for 3 years, and you have to prove that they haven't changed. You can use this tool to monitor those files and system inventory. Active response, I'm going to be honest with you. I've never done the active response using OSSEC, so I can't really speak intelligently to it. But they do say if you run it organically, you can use the active response. I mean, it'll integrate with your firewall, block IP addresses, and do all those sort of things. I've never done it. I just know that you can if you want to. So anyway, so remember when I talked about this, right? Governance, creating an account, and a real world application. So let's take a look at log-based intrusion detection using OSSEC. So basically the agent collects all his log files, sends it to the server, and the server analyzes the file. So here you go. I got an alert. And it's kind of funny, going way back in time, and as I need to watch my time, right, I did this project. Basically, long story short, I found myself toe-to-toe with a premier red team, a U.S. red team. And so I was a superintendent of a team, and we used Security Onion at the time with OSSEC. And OSSEC installed itself, OSSEC, what happened, the red team got in and we didn't know it. But what they did, they went back, remember, they tried to maintain persistence. They started creating user accounts and adding them to the administrators group. And that's how we caught them. And they were like, oh my, and this goes back many years. That's when certain parts of the world realized how important it was to maintain an active network defense. Anyway, this what you're looking at is Alien Vault. So I created a user account, and there's 2 alerts there on the bottom. The one at top, there's changes to the administrators group. So just a kind of a deep dive. This is, you can see I kind of sanitized a little bit, but I created an account name called InfoSec, right? So if you're an outside administrator, you'd be like, InfoSec, oh, it's those guys again, leave me alone, and here that account is added to the administrators group, a local group on the server. So that's why I was trying, this is just one example of the log-based intrusion detection. It alerted me to it. So like, if you do log analysis, where I come from, I get almost 2 million log messages an hour. How can you analyze 2 million messages an hour, right? You need to sort it out. This is a great way to sort it out. So rootkit malware, this is real true to life, something I just pulled off of my sim, and Linux based, and this is rootkit detection. And if you're familiar with what a rootkit is, really to meet the definition of what a rootkit is that you're installed at such a low level, you're able to hide yourself from things like file directories, or in this case, the showing of running processes. So your process runs, but if the administrator logged in and showed all the running processes, it wouldn't be there. That's a rootkit. So anyway, see as a result, actually in this case, after a whole bunch of investigation, turned out to be those Dockers. So they're a lot of fun anyway. And finally with OSSEC, wow, what a savior for Amazon EC2s. I don't know if any of you are familiar or do any work out in Amazon. I recently got certified. I encourage everyone. Apparently, the whole world's going Amazon, but you know, they have a shared security model. And long story short, you can install your OSEC agents on your EC2 instances, and boom, you have some form of view. Because if you try to do network traffic analysis, you know, just as a warning, a little squirrel sidetrack here, network traffic analysis, you really have to pre-plan security with AWS to take advantage of more traditional kind of mindsets how we do things. Because you have to pre-plan putting your network sensors in place between the VPCs. Otherwise, there is a way you can copy VPC traffic, but it gets so expensive in the end. It doesn't make it financially worth it to be out in AWS. So anyway, just my 2 cents. Incident response. How much time? I think I'm out of time. So I'm going to go through some.
Phillip,
Yes, sir. Am I out of
Phillip,
time?
if you want to go a little bit over, I think we're okay with that. We do have a keynote that starts at 11:30, but it's in a different account, so it's not going to interfere with that. And I'll be glad. There are a couple of questions, and I can certainly turn on the mics if you'd like to take a couple of questions before you end.
Okay, you know what? Give me 5 minutes, then we'll take questions. And again, I apologize for a late start. I was in panic mode, and none of the links I got was working. And I tried to. Oh, it's a terrible morning. I was nervous. It's absolutely terrifying to do a presentation, I assure you. So anyway, but no, thank you, Andrew. Give me 5 minutes. I'm gonna go through this quick. Incident response. So virus total. Long story short, one of my users received one of the classic HTML files, victim of a phishing scam. So boom, I go ahead, take the file, upload it to Virus Total. Now in Virus Total, what they're doing, they're running all these antivirus engines against a file. Pick any file you want. In this case, 7 engines identify it as JavaScript, phishing, and a hoax. But look, some big names did not. AVG did not. And if I go down further, McAfee, Bitdefender, they did not identify this file as being dangerous. So this is real world. So this is, I had one of my users, her account was compromised. So anyways, I took the file she sent me, which was an HTML file, and I opened it in Notepad. Notepad is a wonderful, powerful tool. Yeah, I know it's not open source, but it's on your Windows machine. And they have Word text editors, just like the same thing over on the Linux world. So if you don't know what you're looking at, that's HTML encoding. So let's go to an HTML decoder. So I put in what was in the file, show it here, boom, look, I got a URL. So she opened it thinking it was a voice message from our phone system. This is it. That's it. This is real world. I'm not making this up. Remember, security through DNS. I now have a new domain to block, right? So boom, I go back to Virus Total, look at the URL. Oh, everyone said it didn't hit any reputation monitors. Even AlienVolt said it was okay. So here's another reputation monitor, URL void. Go ahead and run that. They say he's okay. You can see there's all sorts of information to give me. I can dig down, learn more. Take the IP address, run it through. Hey, what do you say about the IP address? Bada bing, bada bing, bada bing, right? A lot of information. Everything is not on any reputation list. So Microsoft Safety Scanner. So here's a real world application. So you have, like, again, I have a user. So if she clicked and downloaded one document, how do I know she didn't click and download something else? So Microsoft Safety Scanner is, you know, what do they say? You know, what is better than one BA, 2 BAs? So, you know, 2 is always better than 1. Even though your machine may have a antivirus on it, it doesn't hurt to run something else. And what I'll do, I'm gonna go back here just to show you, and I should have been smart enough to have this beforehand. But remember when I ran this file through the antivirus engines, you know, most of them were saying it was perfectly fine. It didn't even bother looking at the file. So that's why, just a shout out to Windows Defender. You know, I'm thinking about the small business that doesn't have the money the buy. Windows Defender, you know, by using this, your employees download I have other appliances because I have a little bit of a budget, so I got hash marks and all sorts of things. And I can go out to Virus Total and see that Windows Defender oftentimes detect the virus before anyone else does. So Veracrypt, use this tool. Incident response, if you're downloading viruses and malware and that sort of thing, keep it encrypted. Personal data, when you like, let's say you have to investigate what an employee did, and keep it encrypted. You know, incident response, right? No job's done until the paperwork. OSIM, flying through here. Alien Vault OSIM has a ticketing system, so you can create your own security tickets, and it can be assigned to different analysts. When one analyst updates it, sends everyone an email, that kind of thing. A super powerful tool in that respect. The Open Threat Exchange, it's built in Alien Vault. It could be integrated in OTX. So just go out to their website. It's part of AT&T Security. These are subscriber contributions. So I did a deep dive on one. Here's My Doom Malware. I did this morning. It talks about indicators of compromise, host names, file hashes, domain names, IP addresses. So I dug down a little deeper, and with this, I found all these domain names, which of course are ridiculous. So why would anyone within your network normally go to them? Hey, there's an easy way to block them. Ancillary tool, Wireshark, TCP dump. Wireshark, probably most of you are familiar with, TCP dump. How I find myself using this the most is whenever the administrators are complaining that my firewall's blocking their traffic. Boom, I just sniff their traffic. I go, nope, it's there on the network. It's your computer refusing, your server refusing it. So I love that tool. You do lots of purposes. Here's some testing for websites. So if your company runs websites, so here's some tools: Postman, Burp Suite, and Zapper. I won't get into Postman. It's about API development and testing, as is Burp Suite. Burp Suite comes on Kali Linux with a limited license. The OWASP Zapper. This is a tremendous tool. Just follow the instructions, run your corporate web pages through it, see if there's something needs to be fixed. I'm a huge advocate of MFA. MFA has saved my corporate data like you would not believe. So here's an open source tool. It gets a little complicated integrating it, but it's there. You can use it, work it. OpenVAS, Open Vulnerability Assessment Scanner. It's built in the Alien Vault, OSIM. Take advantage of it. I don't like the standalone version myself, but it's also built into Kali Linux, needless to say, because it's used for pen testing. And Greenbone is the name of the company that owns it. So SSL server tests, if you want to test your SSL, go ahead, just put your URL in there and just scan it. It'll tell you what your grade is. And that's me. Hey, there's my email address. Thank you so much. I apologize again for my late start. That was totally on me. And what are the questions, Andrew?
I've opened up the mics, so if you guys have any questions, just jump on in there.
Hey, Philip, this is Jeff. Fantastic presentation, and I love your inclusion of dad jokes. My kids are about to have
Okay, thank you.
for me. Hey, just a couple of trivial questions. No, we're about out of time, but I am pretty ignorant about open source security tools, and I've been exposed to the marketing of some big commercial security companies. Could you address this concern? Again, this is in my ignorance about, hey, if I put this open source IDS in place, am I going to have to?
Well, right.
Yeah,
Oh,
more
okay.
time, more man hours maintaining it. Can I subscribe to signatures, or do I have to write those myself or farm them out? Would you mind to answer that question? Because I honestly don't know.
Well, so let's take the engines themselves. For example, Snort and Suricata. You don't have to write signatures, but you can if you want to. There is a community that keeps them up to date. Like for Snort and Suricata, if you install them independently, yeah, in my humble opinion, yes, it's a little bit of a burden. But when you use the platforms such as Alien Vault and Security Onion, Security Onion is technically a distribution, as is Alien Vault. So no, there's not a lot of maintenance there, and it's a powerful tool. I mean, if you're fortunate enough like me, I have a quote unquote little bit of a budget. I got some high end items I'm so grateful to have, but I have to fight for every penny. Whereas larger U.S. government, where I came from, I had money thrown at me. So I understand your concerns. One is time. Do you have to learn? No. If you're going to be the architect or engineer, if you're in a management role, like what I've learned as a superintendent, I have this basic knowledge as far as I'm concerned. So I take people and I bring them to my point of hey, here's my basic knowledge. Now I empower them. Now go learn everything you can about it. If you're in a management type of role. So that's what I do, and let them worry about that mess. But open source tools can be maybe a little more labor intensive when you have a problem, because you have to figure it out and solve it yourself. But then again, at the same time, it just, your attackers, the people coming for your data, that's what they're using. So you want to be as good with those tools as they are. So and it's always you don't want to put all your eggs in a single basket. I don't. I have commercial tools and I have open source tools. And so it's all about measuring the risk. For example, sandbox analysis. I pay commercially for sandbox analysis for files that traverse my network, so to speak. But there are open source tools out there. They are labor intensive. They are time intensive. I don't want the time. I don't want the labor. So with my limited budget, I make sure it's thrown at a commercial product that does it for me, and it does the analysis, and it sends me the report of what the malware did. You know what I'm saying? So I really don't. Ultimately, I don't think the open source tools are that much harder. Granted, when you have a concern or a problem, you have to dig up the solution yourself. Technology people love that. Those of us who are overworked or in management roles, we don't have time for that. So I hope I kind of sort of answered your question without babbling too much.
Absolutely. And no, absolutely. And I appreciate the fact that, you're saying, hey, open source isn't the solution to every problem. And I hear you loud and clear. Working for an SMB, you have to fight tooth and nail for every dollar and want to make sure it's spent the right way.
But do remember, especially security, the Security Onion, Kali Linux, Alien Vault, extremely powerful tools. And the beauty of it is they're Linux. If they do blow up on you, just reinstall it and start over. And other than your OSEC agents having to talk back to their mothership, that's just what I do. I have problems. I don't even take the time to troubleshoot them. I'll just blow it out and reinstall it. So, and move on.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Phillip.
Oh, you're welcome. They are very powerful tools. Any other questions? Is that it, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that takes care of it.
Thank you, sir, so much. Thank you for the help, and thank you to everyone for listening to me. Listen to me stutter. That's what I do. And take care, everybody. I'm going to end the program now.
Thanks, Phillip.
No, thank you. If I can figure out how.